Welcome back, everyone, to Deep Dive Weekly. We're all about helping you understand your credit score, making sure your finances are safe and sound, and discovering resources for a successful financial future.
That's right.
And today, we are taking a deep dive into a topic that is honestly becoming more and more relevant every single day. Teenagers and credit cards. We really want to equip you with the knowledge to understand how young people can navigate this financial tool because credit cards are powerful.
Right.
But you have to know how to use them.
Absolutely.
So we can help them set themselves up for success down the road. And what's really interesting is we've been looking at some data that shows that there's a really huge number of teenagers that are already part of the workforce.
Wow.
More than a third of 16 to 19-year-olds are actually working and contributing to the economy.
That's really interesting.
Which means that they are interacting with money.
Right.
They're earning money.
Yes.
They may even be managing money.
Yeah.
But they may not know how to use credit responsibly. Right.
So that's what we're going to be focusing on today.
I like it.
Because we want to give you the tools and the insights to guide the young people in your life to really build a strong financial foundation.
Yes.
So one of the things that we found really fascinating was the way that access to credit cards for young adults has actually changed over the years.
Okay.
You know, before 2009, things were quite different. And then this law, the Credit Card Act of 2009, came into effect.
Right.
And it really shook things up, especially for people under 21.
Okay.
So now, if you're under 21, it's not as easy to just get your own credit card.
I see.
You typically need a cosigner.
Yeah.
Or you have to show that you have some income coming in that's independent from your parents.
Okay.
So it's become a little bit more complex. And because of that, proactive education and guidance are really important.
They are, yeah.
And that's what we want to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how can a teenager actually get their hands on a credit card? Well, you know, the most common way, especially for younger teenagers, is actually being added to a parent's account as what they call an authorized user.
Okay, an authorized user.
So can you tell us a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, I mean, I know how it works in theory, but I'm really interested to hear what the implications are.
Well, as an authorized user, that teen, even though they're under 18, will get their own card with their name on it.
Right.
And they'll be able to use that card.
Right.
But here's the key takeaway.
Okay.
Even though they have the card and they're using it, the parent is the one who's legally responsible for paying that bill.
So it's not their debt.
It's not their debt, exactly.
That's their parents.
It's the parents' debt, and the parents are responsible for making sure that bill is paid.
So is there any benefit then for the teenager?
Well, that's the interesting thing.
Okay.
This can be a great way for a teenager to start building their own credit history.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and, you know, good credit is so important.
It is.
Later on in life.
It is.
You know, whether they're trying to rent an apartment, get a car loan, or even, you know, sometimes get a job.
Absolutely.
Having good credit can really open doors and make things a lot easier.
Yeah.
So how does this work? Well, when the parent is making those payments on time, that positive payment history actually gets reported via the credit bureaus under the teenager's name.
Interesting.
And so that starts building their credit score from a younger age.
So it's not just about having the card and learning how to, you know, swipe it.
Right.
Exactly.
It's about building that positive credit history.
Yeah.
And we actually saw a statistic from TransUnion that said over half of teenagers are added as authorized users by age 14.
Wow.
So it's pretty common practice.
That is pretty young, though.
It is.
You know, you're barely a teenager.
Hey.
You're already starting to build your credit history.
Yeah, it's kind of wild.
Okay, so let's fast forward a bit. Let's say a teenager becomes 18 years old.
Right.
What changes then?
Well, there are a few more options that open up.
Okay.
One is that a parent or a legal guardian can actually co-sign for a credit card for them.
Okay, so this is a little bit different.
It is a little bit different
than being an authorized user.
Yes.
So as a cosigner, what are the responsibilities there?
Well, in this case, the teenager actually applies for the card in their own name.
Okay.
And they're the ones who receive the bill.
Okay.
But because they might not have a very long credit history yet or a steady income, the parent steps in as this cosigner to basically vouch for them.
Yeah.
So it's like saying, hey, I trust this person. I believe they're going to pay their bills.
Right.
And I'm willing to take on the responsibility if they don't.
So it's still a pretty big responsibility.
It is a huge responsibility for the parent.
Yeah.
Because if that young adult doesn't pay their bills, the parent is legally obligated to pay.
Oh.
So it's not something to enter into lightly.
Right.
It requires a lot of trust,
Yeah.
a lot of communication,
Yeah.
and making sure that everyone's on the same page.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
About how that credit card is going to be used.
Okay, so that's one option.
Yeah.
Once someone turns 18,
Mm-hmm.
what about just applying for a credit card on their own?
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility too.
So how would that work?
Well, once you're 18, you can look into things like student credit cards.
Okay.
Or cards that are specifically designed for people who are new to credit.
Right.
Haven't had a chance to build up a long history.
So no credit history yet.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
But here's the thing. To actually get approved for one of these cards, you typically need to show that you have some sort of verifiable income.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, it could be from a job.
Right.
But it could also be things like scholarships or grants.
Okay, yeah.
The important thing is being able to prove to the credit card company that you have a way to repay the money that you borrow.
Absolutely. You're not just spending money you don't have.
Exactly.
You have to have some way to pay it back.
Right.
So do those cards typically come with any, like, restrictions or limitations?
Often they do. Yeah.
Okay.
Typically, those initial credit cards will have lower credit limits.
Okay.
Now, here's the thing that's really important for young people to understand.
Okay.
Even though the credit limit might be lower,
Yeah.
if they overspend or they miss payments,
Yeah.
that can still hurt their credit score.
Oh, okay.
It's not really about how much credit you have.
Right.
It's about how you manage the credit that you do have.
Right. Being responsible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what really matters.
Okay, so we've heard a lot about credit limits.
Yes.
We've heard about credit scores. And one thing that we've also come across is these terms secured and unsecured credit cards.
Can you explain the difference between those two?
Sure. So an unsecured credit card
is kind of what most people think of when they think of a credit card.
Okay.
It's basically you're given a line of credit without having to put down any collateral.
So you're just trusted with that credit based on your history.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
And that decision about whether to give you that line of credit is largely based on your credit score and your credit history.
Gotcha.
Now, for a teenager who's just starting out and maybe hasn't had a chance to build much of a credit history, it can be tough to qualify for one of those unsecured cards.
Okay, so what's the alternative then?
Well, that's where secured credit cards come in.
Okay.
And these are a great option for someone who's starting to build their credit.
Okay.
Basically, with a secured credit card, you're required to put down a security deposit.
Okay.
And that acts as collateral for your credit line.
So it's like a safety net.
Exactly.
For the credit card company.
Right. So if for some reason you're not able to pay your bills, they have that deposit to cover the debt.
Gotcha.
The credit limit on a secured card is usually equal to the amount of the deposit.
Okay.
So if you put down $500, you'll typically have a $500 credit limit.
Okay.
Now, here's the really important thing to keep in mind.
Okay.
You want to make sure that the provider of that secured card actually reports your account activity to the 3 major credit bureaus. Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion.
So you're actually building your credit.
Exactly. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
If they don't report it,
right,
then it's not really helping you build your credit score.
It's almost like it doesn't exist.
Right. It's like you're using the card in a vacuum.
Okay, so we've talked about the different ways that teenagers can actually access credit, whether it's through authorized users, co-signing, or applying on their own.
Yeah.
But it's not just about getting the card in their hands.
No, it's not just about handing them plastic.
It's about so much more than that.
It's about giving them the tools and the knowledge to actually use it responsibly.
Absolutely.
So financial literacy is absolutely key.
So how do we actually prepare teenagers to use credit responsibly?
Well, a good place to start is actually with a checking account.
Oh, okay.
It might seem simple,
right,
but it's a great way to introduce them to the basics of money management.
Yeah.
You know, things like depositing money, making withdrawals, checking their balance. These are all really important skills to have.
So it's like laying the foundation.
Exactly.
So what comes after that?
Well, once they're comfortable with a checking account, a debit card can be a good next step.
Okay.
It looks and acts a lot like a credit card.
Right.
But the money comes directly from their checking account.
Gotcha.
So they can practice spending, but without the risk of going into debt or hurting your credit score.
So it's like training wheels.
Exactly. It's like training wheels for credit. And, you know, even platforms like PayPal
Oh, yeah.
can serve a similar purpose.
So it's getting them comfortable with those digital transactions.
Exactly. It's all about getting them familiar with how money moves in the digital world.
All right, so they've got the checking account. They've got the debit card. What else can parents do to really prepare them for the world of credit?
Well, I think one of the most valuable things parents can do is involve their teenagers in their own financial lives.
Okay, interesting.
To an appropriate degree, of course.
Right, of course.
But if you are someone who uses a credit card responsibly, consider showing your teenager your monthly statement.
Okay.
Walk them through the different charges. Explain how you pay the balance.
Right.
Really emphasize that when you make purchases in 1 month, you have to pay for them the next month.
It's not free money.
It's not free money.
It's delayed.
Exactly. And breaking down that misconception is so important because it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking, oh, I can just buy this now and worry about it later.
Yeah. And you know what? I think that's a trap that even adults fall into.
Absolutely. It's so easy to do.
It is.
Especially in today's world where everything is so instant.
It is.
Yeah. You can buy things with just a click.
With a click.
And it's easy to lose track of how much you're actually spending.
Yeah. It's almost like it's not real money.
Right. It can feel that way.
Because you're not physically handing over cash.
Exactly.
So what are some of those really key concepts that teenagers need to understand?
Well, we've got to talk about things like interest grace periods.
Yeah.
Late fees, interest rates.
Okay.
They need to know that if they don't pay their balance in full and on time, those purchases are going to end up costing them a lot more.
Yeah, it's not just the price tag.
Exactly. And, reviewing a credit card agreement together can actually be a really helpful exercise.
Really break it down.
Yeah, because it explains all of those terms. Right. And it can be really eye-opening.
Yeah. Okay, so interest rates, I think that's something that a lot of people maybe don't fully grasp.
That might be confusing.
Yeah. How would you explain that to a teenager?
Well, an interest rate is basically the cost of borrowing money.
Okay.
It's expressed as a percentage. So if you have a credit card with a 15% interest rate, that means that for every $100 you borrow, you're going to have to pay back $115 over time.
So it's more expensive.
It is. It's like a fee for borrowing that money.
And that can add up really quickly.
It can add up incredibly quickly.
Yeah.
Especially if you're only making minimum payments.
Right. Okay, so interest rates are important.
Very important.
Are there any resources that you would recommend?
Yeah, absolutely.
For parents and teenagers to kind of learn more about all of this?
Definitely. So the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, or CFPB as it's known.
CFPB, okay.
They have a ton of great information on their website that's specifically designed for teenagers.
So it's easy to understand.
Exactly. It's written in a way that's engaging and accessible.
Yeah.
And, beyond just the basics of money management, I think it's also really important to teach teenagers about card safety.
Okay.
Make sure they understand how to keep their card secure.
Right.
What to do if it's lost or stolen. Those are really important things to know.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
We've talked about how teenagers can access credit.
Right.
We've talked about financial education, the resources available. But now let's talk about the actual responsibility of using a credit card.
I like it.
So how do parents transition from, talking about credit to actually letting their teenager use it?
Well, one really effective way is to make them responsible for paying at least part of their credit card bill with their own money.
So using their allowance.
Yeah, their allowance.
Or their earnings from a job.
Exactly. When they're actually contributing to paying that bill.
Yeah.
It really clicks for them.
Yeah.
They understand the value of money.
Yeah.
And they're less likely to overspend.
It's not just abstract anymore.
Exactly. It's like, oh, this is coming out of my pocket.
Right. This is my hard-earned money that I'm using to pay for this.
It's a real-world consequence.
Yeah.
Yeah. And along with that, it's really important to teach them about saving.
Okay.
So instead of immediately whipping out the credit card, if they want something, encourage them to set a savings goal.
Okay.
And work towards it.
So they're delaying gratification.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then once they've saved up enough money, they could use the credit card to make the purchase.
Okay.
And that way, they're still learning how to use credit.
Right.
But they're doing it responsibly.
Yeah. And they're not going into debt for something that they want.
And, it also teaches them the value of patience.
Yeah.
And planning ahead.
Okay. So that's really interesting.
Yeah.
What about paying the balance on time?
Oh, that's absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
It's really important to instill that habit
Yeah.
of paying the entire credit card balance.
The full balance.
The full balance
Oh.
every month.
By the due date.
By the due date, no exceptions.
Okay.
That's the key to avoiding those pesky late fees.
Right.
And the interest charges that can really add up.
And really snowball.
They really can.
Yeah.
So to help them stay on track, suggest practical things like setting reminders on their phone.
Okay.
Or even explore setting up automatic payments.
Okay.
But, and this is a big but, they have to make sure they have enough money in their account
to cover it.
To cover those automatic payments.
Right, because you don't want them overdrafting.
You do not want them overdrafting.
Yeah, okay.
That's a whole other set of fees.
Right, it defeats the purpose.
It really does.
Okay, so we're teaching them to be responsible.
Yeah.
We're teaching them to pay on time.
Uh-huh.
But one of the big concerns for a lot of parents is overspending.
Yeah, that's a valid concern.
So how do we set some healthy boundaries?
Well, setting spending limits is really important.
Okay.
Sit down with your teenager and have a conversation about, okay, how much do you think is reasonable to spend on this card each month?
Yeah. What are your needs versus your wants?
Exactly. And you can also define what types of purchases are acceptable.
Okay.
And what types are not.
So like no video games.
Right. Or maybe the credit card is only for things like gas.
Okay. Or emergencies.
Exactly. Emergencies, school supplies.
Right. Yeah.
Things that are essential.
Okay. And then you can monitor their usage?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a good idea to check in regularly, see how they're doing.
Yeah.
Are they staying within those limits?
Right.
Are there any areas where they're struggling?
And it's a good opportunity to have conversations.
Exactly. It's all about open communication.
Yeah.
And, if those spending limits are exceeded, it's perfectly okay to have consequences.
Right. To teach them that there are consequences for their actions.
Exactly. And that's how they learn.
Right.
Actions have consequences.
So spending limits are really important.
They are.
Is there anything else that teenagers should be aware of?
Well, we've got to talk about credit utilization.
Okay, what's that?
So your credit utilization ratio is basically how much of your available credit you're actually using.
Uh-huh.
So if you have a credit card with a $1,000 limit and you've spent $300, your credit utilization is 30%.
Okay.
Now, here's why that's important.
Okay.
Experts recommend keeping your credit utilization below 30%.
Okay.
If you go above that, it can actually hurt your credit score.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it can make you look like you're relying too much on credit. So it's a good habit to get into.
Right.
To keep that utilization low.
So even though you might have a $1,000 limit, you don't have to spend $1,000.
Exactly.
You want to stay below that 30%.
Yeah, it's a good rule of thumb.
Okay. And it's really important to highlight the fact that having a bad credit history can really have some long-term consequences.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not just about getting that credit card.
Right.
It's about using it responsibly and building a good history.
Because a bad credit history can make it harder to get a car loan, rent an apartment, even get certain jobs.
Yeah.
So it's really important to start building good credit early on.
And to show them how to actually monitor their credit report.
Right. And they can actually access their credit reports for free.
Okay.
For the 3 credit bureaus.
Yeah.
Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion.
Okay. So they can see where they stand.
Exactly.
And make sure everything is accurate.
Right. And, one last thing I'll mention about credit limits.
Yeah.
If the credit card company decides to increase your credit limit, don't automatically start spending more.
Okay.
Just because you have a higher limit doesn't mean you have more money to spend.
Right. It's still borrowed money.
Exactly. It's still debt.
That you have to pay back.
Right.
So we've talked a lot about the kind of traditional aspects of credit, credit cards, credit scores, all that. But we're living in a digital age.
We are.
And teenagers have grown up with online shopping at their fingertips.
And they're digital natives.
They are. So what are some of the unique challenges that this presents?
Well, teenagers today are constantly bombarded with online advertising.
It's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's really sophisticated.
Right.
So it's important to help them develop a critical eye when it comes to online spending.
So they're not just clicking and buying.
Exactly. They need to pause and think, do I really need this?
Right.
Or am I just being influenced by this ad?
Yeah. Is this a want or a need?
Exactly. And peer pressure can also be a huge factor online.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, everyone's posting about their latest purchases.
Yeah, look what I got.
Exactly.
I got this new gadget.
Right. And it's easy to get caught up in that.
Right.
So having those conversations about making independent financial decisions is so important.
Yeah. And I think as parents, it's okay to have some transparency.
Absolutely.
With your teenagers.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to online spending.
Right.
You know, set some ground rules. Let them know that you might be reviewing their statements and have those conversations.
It's about accountability.
Yeah.
And making sure that they're not getting into trouble.
Right.
Financially.
And then that ties into online safety as well.
Oh, absolutely.
So what are some key online safety lessons that parents should be talking to their teenagers about?
Well, you know, first and foremost, they need to understand what personally identifiable information is.
Okay, PPI.
PPI, exactly. So things like their full name, address, social security number, bank account details, even pictures of their credit card.
Okay.
This information should never be shared publicly online or on unsecured websites.
Okay, so be really careful.
Be very careful about what you share.
Yeah, and then we've got to talk about phishing scams.
Okay.
You know, these are those tricky emails or text messages or social media messages that try to trick people into giving up their personal information.
Okay, so how do you spot those?
Well, you know, teach them to look for red flags. It's like, are there grammatical errors in the message? Does it sound too good to be true?
Right.
Are they being pressured to act quickly?
Those are all signs that something might be fishy.
And don't click on any links?
Don't click on links from senders that you don't recognize.
Okay.
And then, finally, we've got to talk about scam websites.
Okay.
So teach them how to look for clues that a website might not be legitimate.
Right.
You know, does the address start with HTTPS?
Okay.
Is there a padlock icon in the browser bar?
Oh.
Does the website have contact information?